I woke up on a Tuesday morning believing it would be just another day in the routine I had built for the past 7 years. The alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., that annoying digital beep, beep, beep drilling into my half-asleep brain. Despite the frustration, I didn't hit snooze. I never hit snooze. Responsibility was my mantra, after all. My wife, Isabella, lay on the other side of the bed, her hair splayed out like a fan across the pillow. She didn't stir as I leaned over to give her a quick kiss on the forehead. If she woke at all, she didn't show it. I swung my legs out of bed and headed to the kitchen to make coffee, an old habit that felt comforting. The kitchen was in pristine condition, as always, because Isabella obsessively insisted we keep it Instagram ready. Sometimes I thought she only wanted an immaculate life so she could show it off to her friends, online and in person. But I loved it anyway, or maybe I just told myself I did. After coffee, I drove to the office, prepared to knock out another day as a mid-level manager at a company I had devoted 7 loyal years to. If you had asked me then whether I expected to lose my job, I'd have laughed in your face. My performance evaluations had always been stellar. I consistently exceeded targets. I worked late nights, I worked weekends. I accepted every additional project thrown my way without complaint. That was me, the dependable provider who never let anyone down. Little did I know that by 10 a.m., I'd be walking out of that office with the entire foundation of my life cracked wide open. "Come in," Declan said from behind his imposing wooden desk. He was my boss. A tall man who always kept his hair slicked back and wore a perpetual smug grin, like he was waiting for you to screw up. Still, he had never seemed like the devil in a suit. Until that morning. "Listen, we've got budget cuts, restructuring," he sighed, clasping his hands. "It's nothing personal. You've been an asset to this company, truly, but the board has decided to eliminate your position." I sat there feeling my stomach drop like a lead weight. If my life was a building, that was the first support beam snapping in two. My identity was so wrapped up in being the stable one, the earner, the dependable husband and father, and in one swift blow, it was all gone. "We'll offer you 3 months severance, plus extended health benefits for that period," Declan continued. I wish it didn't have to be this way. I wondered if he really meant that or if it was just corporate lip service. My head felt light, disconnected from the rest of me. I managed to nod, sign a few documents numbly, and then left. In the elevator down to the parking garage, I remember staring at my reflection in the polished steel walls. I looked the same. Blue shirt, pressed pants, polished shoes. But I felt like I'd just been shoved into the role of a new character in a drama I had never auditioned for. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, not crying, not punching the steering wheel, just recasting my entire existence. That's when an odd sense of calm settled over me. I decided not to tell Isabella yet. Instead, I would do something that might cushion the blow. Reminder we were a team. I drove to Trader Joe's, grabbed ingredients for her favorite pasta dish. On a whim, I also picked up a fancy bottle of red wine and a $65 bouquet of lilies and hydrangeas. Probably a foolish expense when I just lost my job, but I wanted to signal to her, "Look, I'm still the man you married. I can still take care of us." I arrived home early, spent 2 hours cooking a real feast. Homemade tomato sauce simmered with garlic and basil, fresh noodles, and a side salad with homemade dressing. I found candlesticks in the back of a cupboard and set them on the table to create a romantic atmosphere. It felt almost theatrical, but I wanted the moment to be perfect. I told myself we'll handle this together. Isabella walked in at 5:30 p.m., our daughter Catalina trailing behind her. Catalina was 10 years old, shy but bright. She had just returned from her piano lesson, and usually she'd greet me with a little wave and half smile. This time she just stood there, wide-eyed, sensing the tension in the air that I hadn't even realized was there. "What's all this?" Isabella asked, standing with one hand on her hip. She wore a crisp blazer, high heels, and had her nails done in some elaborate pattern. I suddenly felt silly standing there with an apron over my shirt. "I thought I'd treat you to a special dinner," I said. "Something happened at work, but let's talk after we eat." Her eyes narrowed. "No, tell me now," she insisted. "You've never done anything like this on a random Tuesday. Something must be up." I tried to keep it light in front of Catalina. "We can talk later." "No," Isabella snapped. "We talk now." So I swallowed and told her the truth. That the company had let me go, but I had a decent severance, and I was sure I'd find something new quickly. We had savings to get us by. It would be okay. At least, that's what I said aloud. Isabella stared at me, then at the bouquet I was still awkwardly holding, and let out a snort. What's this? A guilt gift from an unemployed clown? The words stung. I glanced at Catalina, who had her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't believe her mother could talk to me like that. But Isabella wasn't done. She took the flowers from my hand, walked to the kitchen sink, and threw them in. Water splashed all over the counter. My heart pounded in my ears. See, Catalina, that's what a failure looks like, Isabella said, turning to our daughter. Catalina's face twisted in confusion and fear. I felt frozen, forced a small smile, and stayed silent, partly out of shock, partly because I didn't want to escalate things in front of our child. That night, Isabella unleashed a vicious tirade on me after Catalina went to bed. She ranted about mortgages, social status, the Aspen trip she'd been planning, and how humiliating it was going to be for her to tell her friends. Not once did she ask if I was okay. Eventually, I migrated to the couch, still reeling from her cruelty. As I stared at the ceiling, I realized how many red flags I had ignored in the name of love. She had always been obsessed with appearances, always pushing to impress her circle of superficial friends. Yet I had married her, had a child with her, and built an entire life around this woman who saw me only as her personal ATM. The next morning, she went to Pilates, ignoring me as if I no longer existed. That's when I dug into our finances and discovered she'd opened a secret credit card 6 months ago, racking up over $15,000 in charges for luxury goods, spa weekends, and more. There was also a $22,000 personal loan. Where that money went, I could only guess. Designer bags? Botox? Emergency fund? The betrayal stung almost as much as losing my job. By the time she came home and started complaining on the phone to her friend Rhonda about my unemployment embarrassing the family, my entire perception of our marriage had changed. We were not the partners I had believed us to be. We were strangers sharing a house. And apparently, she had set the timer on this marriage long before my firing. But I didn't know how deep the betrayal truly went yet. 3 days after losing my job, I still tried to be civil. I told Isabella I was applying to every possible opening, that I'd figure something out soon. She rolled her eyes. That evening, I was relegated to the couch again. Catalina had already gone to bed, or so I thought. Around midnight, I stirred, half awake, when I heard hushed voices. The living room was connected to the hallway by a thin door, so every now and then, if people were in the hall, I could catch snippets of conversation. It was Isabella whispering, presumably to Catalina, though the words didn't make sense at first. "Mom, when will we move to my real daddy?" Catalina whispered. I froze. My entire body went rigid. Real daddy? "I don't want to live with this clown," she continued, her voice hushed but insistent. "I'm scared of clowns. I don't like clowns." My mind spun, heart pounding. Why would Catalina say such a thing? "Shh," Isabella said. "After I deal with the finances, we'll move. Just a little longer. Then we can be with Declan for good." Declan, my boss, my ex-boss who had just fired me. That Declan? I almost sat up, wanting to confront her, but something told me to remain silent. I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed, letting the darkness of the living room cloak me. The conversation was short, but it felt like a wrecking ball had just obliterated the last standing column of trust in my life. Catalina, my daughter, who I had raised as my own, was apparently calling Declan her real daddy, and Isabella was promising they'd move in with him once the finances were settled. My mouth tasted bitter, my hands trembled, but I forced myself to stay still, to keep listening. The house fell silent a moment later. I heard Isabella usher Catalina back to her room, then footsteps returning to the master bedroom. I could barely breathe. The magnitude of the betrayal was so overwhelming I felt nauseous. My wife was cheating on me with my boss, and not only that, but it sounded like Catalina might not even be my biological child. I didn't sleep at all that night. My mind flooded with memories, the times Declan had invited me to dinners, how he'd seemed so friendly, how I'd introduced him to Isabella, the times he would pay too much attention to her at company events. I had chalked it up to him being a naturally flirtatious guy. Now, everything made sense. The contempt Isabella had shown me, her constant remarks about status, the way she had flirted with him openly at the neighborhood BBQ. Come dawn, my decision was made. I would no longer be the gullible husband. If they wanted to label me the clown, I'd show them just how deadly a clown's revenge could be. I rose from the couch, quietly got dressed, and left the house before Isabella even stirred. I dialed an attorney I'd once consulted for estate planning and requested an emergency appointment. "We can fit you in at 9:30, the receptionist said. Perfect. The drive across town felt surreal, like I was floating above the steering wheel, watching myself from a distance. My reflection in the rearview mirror showed a man with dark rings under his eyes, jaw set in grim determination. The attorney was a no-nonsense woman named Margaret Bennett, known for handling high-stakes divorce and paternity cases. I explained my situation, every humiliating detail. Losing my job, discovering the affair, overhearing that Declan might be Catalina's real father. Margaret's eyebrows arched when I mentioned that name. "Declan Carter?" she asked, tapping her pen on a notepad. "Isn't that the CEO of your company?" "Yes," I said. "I want to consider alienation of affection suits, paternity fraud suits, whatever can be done. I'm beyond caring about decorum." Margaret nodded, flipping through statutes and highlighting a few passages in a thick binder. "Alienation of affection is recognized in some states," she explained. "We'll need proof of a genuine affair that harmed your marriage. Since you've also mentioned paternity fraud, that further complicates the picture. We'll need a DNA test for your daughter, thorough documentation, text messages if possible, any evidence of a relationship between your wife and this man." I leaned forward, voice steady. "I'll hire a private investigator. I want photographic or video proof. She's planning to leave me as soon as the finances are in place. I heard it with my own ears." Margaret's gaze was unwavering. "Then do it swiftly. Once you gather your evidence, we can proceed with a lawsuit. But be aware these suits can get messy. If your wife and Declan attempt to bury you in legal fees, it might be a long battle." I clenched my jaw, nodding. "I'm prepared. I want them to pay. Both of them." She handed me a folder of forms to fill out, instructions for serving divorce papers, and how to go about a paternity test discreetly. She also recommended a reputable private investigator. We parted ways after I wrote a retainer check, and as I walked out of her office, I felt a strange sense of dark satisfaction. If my wife and Declan thought they could humiliate me without consequences, they were about to learn the hard way that I wasn't the nice, docile man they assumed. That very afternoon, I contacted the private investigator Margaret recommended, a man named Carl Donovan. He was ex-military, in his late 40s, with a calm demeanor and a voice like gravel. He listened to my story with a professional distance, then asked concise questions. "Do you suspect your wife meets Declan in person on a regular basis?" Carl asked. "Yes, probably at his office or in random hotels." My bitterness was barely contained. Carl jotted down notes. "I'll start with her daily routine. Track her movements. If they're as brazen as you think, it won't take long to catch them in the act." I gave him photos of Isabella, her license plate number, a schedule of her Pilates classes, the spa days, everything. Carl nodded, saying, "I'll be in touch as soon as I have something." It took less than a week. On a Tuesday afternoon, I got a text message from Carl. "Got them. Check your email for photos. She's with him right now in the parking lot of a Marriott, doing something you won't want to see." Sorry, man. My stomach clenched and my hands shook as I opened my email. The pictures were explicit in their implication. Isabella's head bent over Declan in the driver's seat, intimately engaged with him. If the images themselves weren't horrifying enough, you could see Declan's smug expression from the half-rolled-down window. They were parked behind a building, probably thinking no one would spot them. I might have vomited if I hadn't been so furious. A sickening wave of betrayal rolled through me, but it also fueled my rage. I forwarded the photos to Margaret immediately, along with a short message. "Let's move forward." I didn't confront Isabella yet. I continued my charade of looking for a job, letting her believe I was clueless. In truth, I was orchestrating a far bigger takedown. Not only did I want a divorce with everything stacked in my favor, I wanted to drag Declan's reputation through the mud. In my state, there were still archaic laws on the books that would let me sue him for alienation of affection, especially if I could prove the affair started before my job was terminated. Coupled with paternity fraud, if indeed Catalina wasn't my child, he'd be facing a scandal that could cost him dearly. Catalina was my biggest worry in all this. She was still an innocent kid no matter who her biological father was. I loved her. Even with the overheard conversation, I knew she was repeating what her mother told her. Kids are easily manipulated. especially if they think they're just pleasing the adults around them. But I needed the truth. So I arranged a secret DNA test. It wasn't complicated. I used a discreet mail-in kit. One night, while Catalina was asleep, I took a swab from her toothbrush, carefully following the instructions. For my own sample, I swabbed my cheek, sealed everything, and mailed it in. The wait for the results felt interminable, but I had enough fury fueling me that I managed to keep up the facade at home. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. 0% probability of paternity. Catalina was genetically not my daughter. I felt something akin to a massive iron door slamming shut in my soul. A swirl of heartbreak, anger, disbelief, and an odd sense of liberation. Everything Isabella had built was a lie from day one. If she had been cheating on me with Declan for longer than Catalina's entire life, it meant the betrayal was so deep, I would never see the light on the other side of it. That same day, I contacted Margaret, who confirmed that these results could be crucial in a paternity fraud suit. She also reminded me that Catalina's best interests should remain a priority. You have no legal obligation toward a child who isn't biologically yours, she said, but the emotional bond is another matter. You have to decide how involved you want to be moving forward. I stared out my apartment window. I'd quietly leased a small place near Catalina's school, anticipating a separation. I don't know, I said. I'm furious, but I care about her. Think carefully, Margaret urged. This is going to get very messy. I hung up, my heart heavy, but my mind set on the path ahead. Isabella had sown these seeds of destruction, and she would reap them. While continuing to build my new consulting partnership with my friend Russell, he was the only one I halfway trusted at this point, I meticulously prepared for the final showdown. The lawsuits were being drafted. Margaret had drawn up a paternity fraud complaint that would demand compensation for all the years I financially supported a child that wasn't mine, as well as an alienation of affection suit targeting Declan personally. But I wanted a public unveiling of their lies. It wasn't enough to just serve them behind closed doors. I wanted to humiliate Declan, cost him his carefully curated reputation, and let Isabella watch her gravy train derail in real time. I was past the point of mercy. I learned from Carl, the PI, that Isabella was spending more and more time at Declan's office, presumably planning her next steps. So I arranged a visit there. After calling 2 private security guys I hired off a reputable firm that specialized in personal protection. I wanted to make sure that if Declan called his building security, there'd be a standoff at best, or a spectacle at worst. Both outcomes I was more than okay with. It was a Thursday afternoon. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. I arrived at Declan's office building, an imposing glass tower downtown, accompanied by my 2 hired guards, both tall, broad-shouldered men in simple black suits. One was named Baxter, the other Juan. They knew the plan. We would serve Isabella with the divorce papers, the paternity fraud papers, and the lawsuit notice. We would also make sure Declan got served. But first, I had orchestrated a bigger bombshell. I had discovered that Declan was not only cheating with my wife, he'd apparently had an affair with the wife of one of the company accountants, a man named Gerald who was built like a linebacker. The PI had found damning evidence. Photos of Declan and that accountant's wife together in a hotel bar, then heading to a room. That man, Gerald, had every reason to hate Declan as well. So I'd quietly tipped him off with an anonymous message. Come to your boss's office at 4 p.m. tomorrow if you want to see the truth. I attached a short video clip of Declan and Gerald's wife. That was enough to get him raging. At 3:55 p.m., I was in the lobby. My 2 guards and I entered the elevator. I pressed the button for the 20th floor, my heart pounding with anticipation. The building's security eyed us warily, but I had a visitor's badge. Declan's admin had arranged it weeks ago when I was still an employee. No one suspected anything. Not yet. When the elevator doors opened, I spotted Isabella at the reception desk. She was dressed to the nines. A tight pencil skirt, fitted blouse, heels that elongated her already shapely legs. Her hair was styled in soft waves, makeup flawless. She'd never looked like that for me, not for years. She smiled, until she saw me. Then her face fell. "James, what are you doing here?" she stammered, stepping away from the desk. "I came to see Declan," I said, forcing a pleasant tone. "Is he in his office?" She glanced at the 2 men behind me, obviously confused. He's in a meeting. I'll wait." The receptionist behind the desk was too intimidated by my guard detail to say anything. A couple other employees watched from the corner of their eyes, sensing tension. I didn't bother trying to hide it. Just then, the accountant, Gerald, burst out of the elevator. He was a big man, easily 6'3", probably pushing 250 pounds of muscle. He marched straight up to Isabella and me, chest heaving as if he'd just run a marathon. "Where is he?" Gerald barked. "That son of a bitch is dead." Isabella's eyes went wide, flicking to me, then back to Gerald. "Wait, what's going on?" "Go ahead, Isabella," I said, voice cold as ice. "Tell him where Declan is, unless you want me to do it." She gave me a look of pure panic. Then she tried to smooth it over. "He's in the conference room, but please let me get him for you." "Oh, I bet you'd love to get him," I sneered. "Just like you did in that Marriott parking lot, right?" Her face flushed crimson, a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "You have no idea what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and tapped a few times, showing a photograph of her with her head in Declan's lap. She gasped, face draining of color. A few employees who overheard let out hushed exclamations. The receptionist's hand flew to her mouth. The tension in the lobby soared. "You think I didn't know?" I said, stepping closer so only she could hear. "I've been collecting receipts, Isabella." Before she could respond, Gerald roared, "Where is Carter?" Then he stormed down the hallway toward the conference rooms. Ignoring the receptionist's feeble protests, Isabella tried to follow him, and I seized the chance to walk beside her, my guards in tow. We reached the large glass-walled conference room. Inside sat Declan, 2 board members, and the company's HR director. They all turned to look at Gerald, who banged the door open so hard it ricocheted off the wall. "Jesus, Gerald, what the hell?" Declan stood up, confusion twisting his features. Then he spotted me. His eyes flickered with something like fear. "What's going on here?" I couldn't help the smirk that tugged at my lips. "We've got business, Declan. Personal business." Isabella tried to put on a calm facade. "Can we please step out and talk about this privately?" She glanced nervously at the board members, who all looked thoroughly scandalized. "No," I snapped, loudly enough that my voice echoed in the glass-walled room. "We're going to do this right here where everyone can see. Because this man," I pointed at Declan, "thought he could fire me and take my wife, ruin my life, and get away with it." Declan's face went pale. "This is some kind of joke." "It's not a joke," I said. "I have evidence that you've been sleeping with my wife for years. And guess what else I found out? My daughter Catalina? Yeah, she's actually your daughter, biologically speaking. Want to deny it?" I tossed a sealed envelope onto the conference table. "DNA results. 0% chance she's mine." The HR director let out a small gasp. One of the board members stood, mouth slightly open, looking from me to Declan. The second board member whispered something to the first, eyes wide. Gerald stepped forward, pulling out his own phone. "You piece of filth," he snarled at Declan. "This is you with my wife." He pressed play on a video clip. Too grainy to be public porn, but it clearly showed Declan walking into a hotel room with a woman who was definitely not Isabella. "He's cheating on you too, Isabella," I sneered. "Or did you think you were his only mistress?" Isabella's eyes darted from me to Declan. "How could you?" she hissed at Declan. "You said you loved me. You said we'd start a new life after I left James." Declan raised his hands, stammering. I don't know what any of you are talking about. You can't prove anything. This is slander." "Slander?" I let out a cold laugh. "My attorney will be very interested in hearing that. Actually, let me do you one better. Allow me to introduce these gentlemen." I nodded at Baxter and Juan, who stepped forward. Baxter, in a perfectly calm voice, said, "Declan Carter, you're being served with a lawsuit for alienation of affection, among other claims. Here are the papers." He handed a stack of legal documents to Declan, who looked too stunned to speak. Juan turned to Isabella. "Isabella, you're being served with divorce papers and a suit for paternity fraud." He held them out, and when she didn't immediately take them, he dropped them into the table with a thud. Isabella's face contorted, tears beginning to well up. "James, can we please talk about this?" "Talk?" I snapped. "Sure, let's talk. Let's talk about how you told Catalina I was an unemployed clown. Let's talk about how you planned to move in with Declan once you siphoned enough money from our joint account. Let's talk about how you laughed at me, called me worthless, and never once asked if I was okay after I got fired. I was done with you the moment you threw those flowers in the sink and called me a failure in front of our daughter. But now this? Now you're dead to me." Declan found his voice. "I'll call building security," he growled. "This is trespassing, and you're harassing my employees." I signaled to Baxter and Juan. "They're with me. I doubt your building security is going to intimidate them, but by all means, go ahead." Declan yanked out his phone. Gerald, however, moved faster. He grabbed Declan by the collar and slammed him against the glass wall with a resounding thunk. The entire conference room shook. One of the board members darted out, presumably to find help. "You ruined my marriage, too," Gerald hissed through clenched teeth. Then he slapped Declan hard across the face. Declan's head snapped to the side, a flush of red blossoming on his cheek. "And you fired James after sleeping with his wife? You're scum!" In a panic, Declan tried to scramble away, but Gerald shoved him to the floor, delivering another blow to the boss's jaw. I could see blood at the corner of Declan's mouth. One of the board members cried out, "Stop! Someone call for security!" "I'm not done," I hissed, leaning over Declan. "I want you to know this is just the beginning. I'm going to bury you in legal fees. I'll destroy your reputation. I've already got a new business lined up with a competitor, and they're thrilled to know you're about to be embroiled in a scandal." Isabella rushed forward, tears streaming. "James, don't do this. We can figure something out." "Figure out what?" I said, stepping back from Declan. "You've already got everything you need, right? Except all that money you stole out of our account is half mine. And I'm going to fight you for every last cent. Oh, and that lavish lifestyle you love so much, that ends today." Declan spat a bit of blood onto the conference room carpet, wincing as he tried to stand. You bastard! You can't pin everything on me. You were incompetent at your job. That's why I fired you. Isabella complained about you for years, said you were worthless. I let out a hollow laugh. You two deserve each other. But guess what? She's not the only one you were screwing behind my back, so maybe you deserve to be alone. Or maybe you can keep collecting women like trophies. It won't matter when your career is torpedoed. Gerald, adrenaline still pumping, grabbed Declan's phone and chucked it across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, to the startled gasps of the HR director and the second board member. That was apparently the last straw for building security, who came rushing in. But Baxter and Juan intercepted them, calmly explaining that we were simply there to serve legal papers, and that Gerald's actions, while unfortunate, were a separate matter. Security started pushing, and Baxter calmly but firmly pushed back, preventing them from laying hands on me or Gerald. "Let's go," I finally said, signaling to Gerald to step away. He hesitated, glaring down at Declan's writhing form on the floor. "You're lucky I don't end you," Gerald muttered. Then he stomped out of the room, leaving Declan bloodied and humiliated. The HR director looked like she might faint. As for Isabella, she stood in the middle of the wreckage, tears streaming down her cheeks. She reached for me, but I stepped out of her grasp. "James," she whispered, "we can talk." "I'm sorry. Please, let me explain." "I don't want your explanations," I snarled. "But I will see you in court." I pivoted on my heel and strode out, Baxter and Juan at my sides. When the elevator doors finally slid shut behind us, I let out a long breath. My heart thundered in my chest, a storm of emotions swirling inside, but I felt an odd sense of triumph. I knew the real battle would be fought in courtrooms, not in that conference room, but I had wanted to see the look on their faces when I revealed the truth. And I got it. I got it in spades. After months of grueling legal warfare, I prevailed on every front. Declan resigned under pressure from the board, publicly disgraced by the alienation of affection lawsuit and the revelations of multiple affairs. Isabella faced paternity fraud charges. The court ordered her to repay me a substantial sum for the years I'd supported Catalina. Though Catalina was Declan's biological child, I chose limited visitation to maintain our emotional bond. Gerald divorced his wife and joined me as an accountant in my new venture. When the final gavel fell, both Isabella and Declan paid financially and socially for the lies they had spun.